Not done this brave and wonderful and courageous thing, such as leaving. But when they did what they did, they were often about your age, because when people migrate, they often are doing it at a very young age. And that's because the older people can't really make the crossing. By the time you get to a certain age and point in your life, they can't make that long journey. So many of the people who leave are leaving not for themselves, but often with this dream of what might happen when they get there. This dream that's very distant and far away. They often don't leave for themselves, they leave for the unseen children and grandchildren, because in some ways when you have lived under a difficult circumstance, it's too late to make up for what you didn't get if you were young and you didn't get access to good nutrition and you didn't get access to health care. But it's not too late for the children and the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, which is where all of us come in. When people leave, they're often at the cusp of life, as I said, and when they leave, they are often, I want to focus on this moment of departure, when someone in all of our backgrounds had to have done what I'm about to describe. And that is a moment when a young person's made the decision that they must go. And they are there on a dock about to board a ship to cross the Atlantic. Or they are there about to board a train. They're on a train platform about to leave a place called Alabama or Georgia or South Carolina for a place called Boston or for a place called New York or Detroit or Cleveland or wherever it might be. And there with them at that railroad platform, at that dock as they're about to board a ship, are their parents or whoever raised them and got them to that point. Remember, the older people cannot make the crossing with them. Their grandparents, their aunt, their uncle, whomever it might be. And at that moment, there is no guarantee that that young person who's about to make that crossing, remember somebody in all of our backgrounds had to have done this, it's just a matter of who. There was no guarantee that they would ever see the person who raised them again, ever. And that's because it was difficult to travel at that time. There was no guarantee that they would ever see that person again alive. And remember that there was no Skype, no email, no cell phones, not even reliable long-distance telephone service, if you can imagine that. And even for people, even if there had been reliable telephone service, a lot of people that they were leaving in the old country didn't even have telephones. That meant that there was no guarantee that they would ever set eyes on their parents again. Think about the magnitude of that sacrifice that that young person or young people in all of our backgrounds had to have made just for us to be here today. No guarantee. The next time that that young person might hear of their own parents, might be a telegram saying that your father has passed away, or that your mother is very ill and you must return home quickly if you were to see her alive again. That's the magnitude of the sacrifice that had to have occurred in all of our backgrounds just for us to be here. And I hope it would be a reminder to all of us that, you know, in some ways, when we are born into this world, we only have one thing that we absolutely must do. There's only one thing that we absolutely must do before we leave this planet. And that is to leave this place, leave this world a little bit better than it was when we arrived. And if we have done that, then we have succeeded. And that's what they were thinking when they were crossing the Atlantic, crossing the mountains, doing whatever it was that it took to get to freedom. And that's what our calling is to do as well, is to take it even beyond that and to fulfill the dreams that they may not even have been able to put into words. And I want to leave you with the words of Richard Wright, who inspired the title of this book. But more importantly, he was one of the people who did this very thing I've described to you. He was one of the great novelists of the 20th century. He wrote Native Son. But more importantly, he wrote about this yearning and this longing that led to really the country as we see it today in many respects. It was the yearning for freedom that created what we now view as America. He was one of these people who was part of this great migration. He wrote about it, that's what his entire career was about. And he wrote these words as he was on the cusp of life about to make a great journey to a place he'd never seen. He was leaving Mississippi for a place called Chicago in 1927, not knowing what would happen to him or how things would go. In some ways, it's a wish and it's a prayer, and it's a poem that is an inspiration for all of us, wherever we might be, and especially for you on the cusp of life. And he wrote, "I was leaving the South to fling myself into the unknown. I was taking a part of the South to transplant in alien soil, to see if it could grow differently, if it could drink of new and cool rains, bend in strange winds, respond to the warmth of other suns, and perhaps, just perhaps, to bloom." Thank you so much for having me this early beautiful morning.